So let's see that what is the basic difference between online learning and batch processing. We will also see the benefits of both these categories, and we will also see the disadvantages of both these categories. So both these categories have their own benefits and disadvantages, and depending upon our situation, our application and the circumstances, we will select or choose that under what domain or what category we want to perform learning of our algorithm. Okay, so now first discuss the batch learning process. In batch learning process, as you can see here in this flow chart, we have some input data set, right? So this is all the data set, which all the training data which I have in my data set. So I will provide all this data to my machine learning algorithm, and I will perform the training of my algorithm on this data set, right? And then once the training is complete, I will try to evaluate that how much training has been done or how good my algorithm, right? So if I see that no, it is not fully trained, or then I will analyze its errors, and I will study the problem domain again, and I will train my algorithm again, right? So this thing will basically be doing in a loop until my machine learning algorithm is fully trained. And once my machine learning algorithm is fully trained and I am happy with its evaluation, then I can basically launch the algorithm to solve the unseen real world problems, right? So this is basically the main flowchart of a batch learning process. In batch learning, it is also sometimes called as the offline learning, right? So one is online learning and the other is the offline learning. All in offline learning, we are basically doing the batch learning process. So here system is incapable of learning incrementally, right? So you can see that I am providing all of my training data set to the training algorithm at once, right? So I am not doing this thing incrementally. Number one thing, it must be trained offline using all the available data, right? So in offline learning, I am utilizing all the available data, and I am basically performing training of my algorithm in an offline mode. So this process can be a very time consuming process, and it can also be a resource intensive process, right? Why? Because I can have a large amount of data and I am providing all of my data at once to my algorithm, which can consume a lot of time. So it can be a time intensive as well as a resource intensive work. Resource intensive will be in terms of memory or processing cost. So all these things will be applicable to my algorithm under offline learning domain. So every time when I will be doing this training, or every time when the training will be happening, I will be using the entire data and I will training my algorithm on the whole data set. And once my system or my algorithm is trained on the whole data set, after the training is completed and I am happy with the results, then I will push it to the production, or it will be used for the prediction or the classification of unseen data set, right? And once it is in the production stage, then we will not be able to perform any kind of learning on it, right? And if I want to perform I have new data and I want to perform the learning again, then in that case I will have to train my algorithm again on the whole data set under offline learning domain, right? So this applies when we are doing the learning under offline domain or the batch learning. So now the question is, okay, my system is trained on the whole data set, but let's see, with the passage of time, maybe after 6 months or after a year, I have some new data or new samples in the data set. So now the problem is that we cannot train our system under offline mode in an incremental fashion, right? So what we need to do, we have to train the new system, and that training will be performed from the scratch on the full data set. So I will utilize the whole data set and I will do this training from scratch, from zero, and I will fully train my system from 0 to end. Now stop the old system and replace it with the newly trained system. So once the newly trained system is active, then we can replace the old system with the new system, and that's how we can incorporate the new data set, right? But again, you can see that after every time I have new data, I need to do the training again and again, and this process is very time intensive and compute intensive. So these are basically main limitations of the batch learning process. Since we have to train the new system every time the new data arrives or the new data comes in, we have to train the system from scratch. So this is a very resource intensive and time intensive step. Why? Because the data set can be huge, right? It can be in terabytes, it can be in petabytes, and training our system on such a huge kind of type of data, it can be very resource and time intensive. And sometimes it can also happen that training the system from scratch is near to impossible, right? Because if the data set size is too high, then maybe our system is not able to tackle that large massive size of data, and it can become a showstopper, and our system may not be able to solve many practical applications, right? So once we have this kind of problem or limitation, then we have to switch from offline mode to online mode. So now let's have a look that what is the difference, the basic difference between the offline learning mode and the online learning mode. So in online learning, you will see that most of the portion is the same, right? I have the data, I am providing it to the system or algorithm, and my algorithm is basically being trained on this data, and then I am putting it to the production. But the major difference is here. In online learning, here my system or my algorithm is not only running but also learning, right? So I am able to provide it new data on the fly. So let's see, let's suppose my I have some new samples coming every month or maybe every week, and my system is able to not only perform the execution on the old data, but it also doing learning on the new data set, right? So this is the approach which we follow in the online learning mode. So in online learning, we are basically training the system incrementally. It is not a one-time process, it is now an incremental process, and we are feeding the new data to the system sequentially, right? So it is a sequential manner. The system, the data is being provided to the system, and it can also be in the form of batches. System can learn from new data on the fly, right? So whenever the new data comes in, we will pass it to the system, and our system will learn from the new data. Good for system where data is a continuous flow, right? So for example, if you are working on an application in which you have some time series data, right? So on every time step you have some new data, so you have a continuous flow of data in that case. So it is a good approach to follow the online learning, and one example of this can be the stock market prediction or stock prices prediction. So it can also happen that if you have some large data set size, you have some application which is based on big data, and you have huge data sets, then what you can do is you can divide the whole data into multiple pieces, right? You can chop it in different pieces, and then you can provide it your system, and your system will be trained on these multiple chunks of the data. So in online learning, when we have huge data set, the data set size is high or large, then we can train it in multiple sets of data, and it is not necessary that you train your system the each subset is being trained on the same machine. You can have multiple machines, and you can divide your data set into multiple batches, and you can do the training on multiple machines as well, because it is the possibility that maybe your batch, your training might not be able to perform on single machine. So systems get trained on each batch incrementally in that case.